Hey everyone, if you love epic sci-fi, mind-blowing apex predators and human courage, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite moment, and subscribe for more wild galactic adventures. Trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. Captain Elias Rook stared at the viewport of the Coalition transport, the swirling clouds of planet Tenera below reflecting in his dark eyes. A planet that had seen more war than peace in the last century, and now for the first time, he would step onto its surface alongside something no human should ever confront without trembling. Subject Kano. The Coalition's crown jewel, a creature engineered to dominate, to kill with precision no army could withstand. Rumors called it a weapon of pure instinct, a predator that had ended entire insurgencies in a single strike. Yet as he observed it pacing in its containment chamber, Elias couldn't help but feel the hum of intelligence beneath its scaly hide, eyes sharp as fractured steel, observing him back with an unspoken question. Kano had been leased to the Coalition for this operation, a suppression of the insurgent remnant entrenched deep in the planet's mountainous territories. Its handlers were cautious, knowing full well that any misstep could turn their own asset against them. Humans were fragile, the Coalition often said, easily broken by fear or emotion. But Elias knew that caution alone wouldn't save them here. Something about the way Kano tilted its massive head, nostrils flaring as if sniffing more than air, suggested it understood more than a machine, and perhaps more than any of the Coalition's officers could comprehend. The transport's doors hissed open, and a wave of humid metallic-scented air rolled into the cabin. Elias adjusted the straps of his tactical gear, feeling the familiar tension of anticipation coil in his chest. He had faced insurgent armies before, outnumbered and outgunned, and walked away with scars that had taught him patience and precision. But nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing except the whispered warnings in the Coalition briefings. Kano responds to threats with surgical accuracy, shows no mercy, and under no circumstance should it form attachments. Yet as Elias stepped closer to the containment chamber, their eyes met again. Kano's gaze was calculating, sharp, yet not hostile. It was curious. It recognized something in him that others had overlooked, an echo of the predator's own suppressed instincts. He extended a gloved hand, not to command, not to assert dominance, but as an acknowledgement. The creature lowered its massive head slightly, the smallest gesture, yet enough to signal the faintest spark of connection. Elias felt a thrill of cautious respect. Here was a being that could end him in seconds, yet hesitated, intrigued by the audacity of a single human standing unafraid. The transport landed with a jolt, shaking the cabin floor beneath their boots. Outside, the Teneran sky was a roiling mass of orange and purple clouds, fractured by flashes of distant lightning. Insurgent activity had been reported in the mountain passes beyond, a network of bunkers and tunnels that had resisted all automated strikes. And now Elias and Kano would face them together. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, heavier than his armor. The Coalition might have deemed this mission routine, but nothing routine existed when survival relied on the cooperation of man and apex predator. Elias led the way down the ramp, Kano following silently, each step a controlled display of raw power. Soldiers flanking them muttered nervous glances at the creature, whispers of past operations and failed missions buzzing through the ranks. But Elias didn't flinch. He had learned long ago that fear is contagious, and if he showed even a hint of hesitation, the predator, and his men, would respond to it. As they advanced toward the first insurgent outpost, the creature's gaze never left him, unblinking, calculating, measuring. The first firefight erupted in the valley below. Kano moved like a shadow through the smoke and debris, striking with deadly precision. Elias, moving in concert, found himself anticipating its maneuvers, covering angles that even trained units couldn't see. Bullets and plasma rounds ricocheted, explosions shook the ground, but together they were a singular force of nature. It was terrifying, mesmerizing, and strangely exhilarating. For every insurgent that fell, Elias felt a subtle shift in Kano's demeanor, as if it were beginning to understand, not just the mission but him. By the time the firefight subsided, the insurgents were in full retreat, leaving behind the charred remnants of their outpost. Elias knelt beside the creature, catching his breath, his gaze meeting those intelligent eyes once more. The connection had strengthened, a silent acknowledgement of mutual respect. He knew the Coalition would be monitoring this closely. They had rules, protocols, orders designed to prevent any bond between human and weapon. Yet as Kano lowered its head to rest momentarily against his armored shoulder, Elias understood that rules might not hold against instinct or against choice. The moment was brief, fleeting but significant. Kano was a weapon for hire, a tool of war, and yet, in that instant, it chose to recognize him. Elias rose, scanning the horizon. The mountain passes still awaited, and deeper conflicts lurked beyond sight. But one thing had shifted irreversibly. A predator's loyalty was no longer dictated solely by contract. And as the sun dipped behind Tnera's jagged peaks, painting the battlefield in blood-orange shadows, Elias allowed himself a quiet thought. The galaxy had underestimated humanity before. Now it would see what happens when a man earns the trust of a weapon no one else could control. The morning light burned through the fractured clouds, illuminating the jagged Tneran landscape in harsh streaks. Elias adjusted his visor, scanning the narrow mountain pass ahead. Intelligence reports had underestimated the insurgents' numbers. Automated surveillance had failed, but the predator moved beside him with quiet confidence, a shadow of lethal muscle and instinct that even the most sophisticated sensors could not capture. Every step they took seemed synchronized, an unspoken rhythm forming between human and apex predator that no one else could comprehend. As they descended into the first valley, insurgent gunfire erupted from hidden bunkers, a hailstorm of plasma and conventional rounds designed to pin them down. Elias raised his rifle, taking careful aim while Kano advanced without hesitation. The creature's claws tore through the reinforced barriers like paper, a blur of motion and strength that left the insurgents scrambling in disbelief. Soldiers accompanying Elias shouted, some in fear, some in awe, but he ignored them, focusing instead on the subtle cues in Kano's movement, tail flicks, shifts in stance, the almost imperceptible tension in its shoulders. A wounded insurgent emerged from cover, weapon trembling in hand, aiming directly at Elias. Kano's head whipped toward the threat, jaws snapping shut before the man could fire. Elias felt the vibration of the strike through the ground, a reminder of the predator's power. Yet what unsettled him was not the violence. It was the precision, the intelligence behind it, as if Kano was choosing whom to eliminate with deliberate care. It was learning, adjusting, and, in a way he didn't yet fully understand, protecting. Hours passed in a blur of combat. Insurgent positions crumbled under the combined force of human strategy and apex instinct. When a hidden ambush trapped Elias behind a collapsed ridge, pain shot through his leg from a grazing plasma round. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to crawl toward partial cover. Orders crackled in his comms, a reminder from the coalition that extraction protocols demanded abandonment under such circumstances. Elias ignored them. Survival wasn't just about following orders, it was about understanding the entity beside him. Kano emerged from the smoke like a living storm, dragging Elias into the relative safety of an overhang. The predator's claws scraped against rock, leaving deep gouges, yet Elias felt no fear, only an odd sense of relief and gratitude. As he caught his breath, he noticed the way Kano's gaze lingered on him, scanning for further threats, its breathing slow but deliberate. There was no command given, no leash enforced, only instinct driven by something Elias could not name. The predator's hesitation in following traditional orders puzzled the coalition handlers observing from the rear. They had expected obedience or indifference, not what they were witnessing, a creature making choices based on trust and perceived loyalty. Their whispers were audible even through the comms. Humans influencing apex predators was unprecedented. Elias had never thought of himself as exceptional, yet Kano's behavior suggested otherwise. He wondered if the creature saw in him what it had once recognized in its own kind, a spark of kinship long suppressed by weaponization. Nightfall brought a temporary lull. The valley was littered with spent rounds, scorched earth, and the subdued groans of the insurgent wounded. Elias tended to minor injuries on himself, testing the strength of his bond with Kano. When he reached out, the predator pressed its massive head against his side, a gesture that defied its reputation as a tool of war. No one had ever witnessed such behavior. It was an anomaly, a silent rebellion against its programming. Elias realized that their survival depended not just on combat efficiency, but on this fragile, unspoken understanding. A sudden tremor in the ground warned of approaching enemy reinforcements, heavier and more organized than before. Elias recognized the gravity of the moment. the predator would not act alone indefinitely. He spoke softly, issuing no orders but offering direction through intuition and subtle cues. Kano responded instantly, moving in tandem, anticipating the enemy's approach, striking preemptively with a combination of raw power and tactical calculation. Each insurgent fallen strengthened the bond, each shared glance confirming that Elias was no longer merely a handler but a partner in a lethal dance. By dawn, the valley was quiet. Bodies of insurgents and destroyed equipment painted a stark tableau, a testament to the unprecedented synergy between human and predator. Elias surveyed the terrain, adrenaline still coursing, noting scars in both the landscape and in himself. Kano rested nearby, not retreating to containment, but remaining vigilant, eyes scanning the horizon, body poised for whatever came next. It had chosen to stay not out of obligation but choice. And in that choice lay the first glimpse of something neither coalition nor insurgent forces could predict. An alliance formed not by contract or control, but by mutual recognition of strength and trust. The silence was brief. Through the smoke and dim light, distant energy signatures flickered, heralding the arrival of larger insurgent forces. Elias knew the coming engagement would be even more perilous, testing not only their physical limits but the depth of their nascent connection. Yet for the first time he did not feel alone in facing it. Kano's presence was a reminder that power could be measured not only in firepower, but in loyalty earned and trust freely given. As they moved toward the next objective, Elias allowed himself a fleeting thought. The galaxy had underestimated what a human could do when partnered with the deadliest weapon ever engineered. Kano had proven it could choose, and Elias knew that choice could change the course of the war, and perhaps the fate of humanity itself. The hum of the Coalition medical bay was antiseptic and unnerving, a stark contrast to the chaos of Tnera's battlefield. Elias lay on a reinforced table, his leg bandaged, muscles aching and mind restless. Beside him, Kano remained outside the reinforced observation chamber, pacing with restrained impatience. Its gaze never left him, unblinking, intelligent and unervingly patient. 4 hours, the predator had refused all attempts at sedation or control, a clear message to the human personnel who had expected compliance. Elias sat up, wincing, testing the strength of his leg. He could feel the subtle tension in Kano's posture even through the thick transparent barrier. There was no aggression, only watchfulness, curiosity sharpened by instinct. No machine, no automated system had ever resisted coalition control like this. Elias realized the truth. The predator was learning from him, attuned not to commands but to his choices, his hesitations and his courage. And somewhere in that recognition, it had chosen to bond. Scientists in white coats argued quietly behind him, their voices clipped and professional, yet laced with panic. Protocol dictated immediate containment override, neurological dampening, even termination if necessary. But Elias ignored them. He had witnessed Kano make decisions based on trust rather than programming, and he understood that breaking that connection would cost lives, his included. He reached a hand to the chamber's reinforced glass, a gesture of acknowledgement and calm. Kano responded instantly, lowering its massive head until its muzzle was mere inches from his hand, nostrils flaring, eyes studying. No one else had ever seen this behavior, and for a moment the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The coalition liaison entered, his expression tight. "Captain Rook, this creature is unstable. It cannot be allowed to continue uncontrolled. You understand the risk." Elias met his gaze evenly. "I understand. But it's not unstable. It's choosing." The man's skepticism was palpable, but Elias did not flinch. The predator's loyalty was no longer contractual, it was earned. And that fact terrified the coalition more than any insurgent army. Night fell over the orbital station, and the hum of distant engines became a lullaby of tension. Elias monitored tactical feeds, noting the insurgents regrouping on Tnera, their numbers swelling with reinforcements. Orders arrived to deploy additional units, but Elias knew the true advantage lay not in numbers, but in the bond between human and apex predator. He had survived ambushes before, relied on machines before, but never on instinct combined with intelligence so formidable it defied classification. Kano's eyes tracked every movement, every shift in light, every subtle vibration in the floor. When Elias spoke softly, offering no commands but guidance, the predator responded, its massive limbs moving with predatory grace through the training simulations the Coalition had reluctantly allowed. Each movement was precise, each strike preemptive, yet tempered by observation of Elias's reactions. It was no longer just a weapon. It was a partner. And Elias felt a rare clarity. In a galaxy dominated by rules and fear, the unpredictable bond between human and apex predator could become the deadliest force alive. The first real test arrived sooner than expected. A contingent of insurgent raiders breached the perimeter, slipping past automated sentries. Alarms blared, casting the room in red light and chaotic shadows. Elias rose, supported by his good leg, and moved to intercept. Kano followed without hesitation, slipping through the chamber door in a fluid motion that left the guards frozen in awe. Their coordination was silent, instinctual. The predator anticipated Elias's positioning, the trajectory of his movements, adjusting its own attacks to complement rather than overshadow him. In the field, the insurgents faltered almost immediately. Kano did not simply eliminate threats. It manipulated the battlefield, hurting enemies, cutting off escape routes, and striking only when necessary to subdue rather than destroy. Elias observed and adapted, guiding the predator's choices through subtle gestures, minimal voice commands, and the shared rhythm they had developed. For the first time he saw the insurgents hesitate, realizing they were no longer facing a weapon they could calculate or a human they could intimidate. They faced a unit operating beyond conventional understanding. When the firefight ended, silence returned, heavy and electric. Bodies and discarded weaponry littered the ground, but neither Elias nor Kano had suffered serious injury. Elias knelt, pressing a hand against the predator's muzzle. No words were needed, the acknowledgement passed between them was enough. Kano lowered its head in submission, not as a conquered tool, but as an equal, recognizing the humanity and courage of the man beside it. The Coalition's observation team was in uproar. Cameras recorded every gesture, every nuanced response. Reports would call this behavior a containment breach, an anomaly, a threat. But Elias knew better. What had emerged was unprecedented. A predator capable of choice, loyalty, and adaptation, and a human capable of inspiring it. Together they had shifted the rules of engagement not by brute force, but by understanding. Elias rose, scanning the horizon from the mountain ridge. The insurgents would regroup, the Coalition would demand control, and yet, in that moment he felt an unspoken certainty. Kano would not obey, they would act together. Choice had replaced command, and in that decision lay their survival, their power, and perhaps, a glimpse of what humanity could accomplish when underestimated. As the first rays of dawn fractured the Tanaran sky, Elias allowed himself a quiet thought, a spark of defiance and anticipation. The galaxy feared unpredictability, yet that fear was now theirs to wield. And somewhere deep within Kano's intelligent gaze, he saw the reflection of his own determination, the promise that the predator would follow not because it had to, but because it chose to. The war had only just begun, and neither man nor beast would face it alone. The Coalition's command center erupted in chaos. Reports streamed in from every sensor on Tanara, containment breaches, insurgent collapses, and anomalies in predator behavior that defied every known protocol. Elias stood on the observation deck, scanning the holographic battlefield, while Kano rested at his side, ears twitching at the faintest vibrations from the valley below. Neither needed orders, both understood the stakes. Survival now depended on instinct, trust, and the choices neither institution could predict. A fleet of Coalition enforcement drones arrived in orbit, their objective clear: terminate both the insurgents and the apex predator that had become an unpredictable liability. Elias adjusted his tactical gear, scanning for vantage points, while Kano's massive frame shifted beside him, muscles coiled, eyes reflecting the cold light of the station's floodlights. When Elias gave the slightest nod, the predator leapt into action, moving with terrifying precision. Its claws tore through the reinforced metal doors, leaving stunned personnel scrambling in its wake. The Coalition's plan to control or kill it had failed before it even began. Outside, the valley burned with chaos. Insurgent reinforcements had doubled in number, expecting an easy fight, only to find a human and apex predator operating in complete synchrony. Elias darted from cover to cover, rifle spitting controlled bursts, while Kano moved through the enemy like a living storm. But this time the predator didn't just strike, it strategized. It blocked escape routes, herded combatants, and anticipated ambushes with a precision no human or machine could replicate. Each movement seemed to respond not only to Elias's direction but to the subtle rhythm of his mind. The insurgents faltered. They had been trained to face apex predators, to expect obedience, to exploit human fragility. Yet here was neither obedience nor fragility. Kanol operated with autonomy, and Elias guided it not through fear but through trust. A group of insurgents tried to flank them from the northern ridge. Elias raised a hand and without hesitation, the predator adjusted its stance, leaping across a shattered ridge to intercept them. Within moments the threat was neutralized not through reckless aggression, but through coordinated intelligence, a combination that left even Elias in awe. Coalition Command attempted intervention, deploying additional strike teams to reassert control. Their ships fired orbital plasma volleys, but Kanol adapted instantly, using terrain and shadows to shield both itself and Elias. The Predator was no longer a tool, it was a partner, a force capable of interpreting tactics, predicting outcomes and acting independently when necessary. Elias realized with growing clarity that this was no longer containment, this was revolution. The galaxy had never seen anything like it, and the Coalition feared it because they had no framework to control a choice-driven apex predator allied with a human. The battle stretched into hours. Elias felt the weight of exhaustion, yet he refused to slow. Every glance at Kanol reminded him that they were more than a soldier and a weapon. They were a team bound by choice, trust, and necessity. When an insurgent commander attempted to retreat in a heavily armored vehicle, Kanol reacted with ingenuity. It leapt onto the vehicle, tearing through armor, but carefully avoiding Elias's line of fire. The Predator's decisions were precise, brutal when required, yet tempered by observation, a balance Elias had never witnessed in any other weapon. As the insurgents' forces broke entirely, Elias felt the first inkling of fear, not for himself but for the Predator. The Coalition would not tolerate this independence. Already reinforcements were arriving not to fight the insurgents, but to neutralize Kanol. Elias's mind raced. Extraction protocols would fail. Containment protocols would fail. If he and Kanol were to survive, they would need to act before the Coalition closed the net. Night fell again over the valley, painting the battlefield in crimson and shadow. Elias crouched beside Kanol, their breathing synchronized, the quiet tension between them palpable. He knew what the coming hours would demand, not just combat but defiance. The Predator had chosen him, and in turn he would choose it, even if that meant becoming an enemy of every authority that sought to manipulate or control life itself. They were no longer operating within rules, they were rewriting them. A faint transmission crackled through his comm, a reminder from Coalition Command of their expectations, their orders, and their impatience. Elias ignored it. Commands meant nothing here. Only choice, strategy, and the bond he had forged mattered. Kanol's eyes met his, and in that gaze was clarity, recognition, and determination. They would face the coming storm together not because they had to, but because they had chosen each other. As the first light of dawn fractured the horizon, Elias scanned the valley one last time. The insurgents had fled, leaving debris and scattered bodies as testament to a force neither anticipated. Behind him, Kanol's massive silhouette remained still, yet poised, muscles coiled and ready. The Coalition's warships hovered above, a looming threat, but Elias did not hesitate. The Predator had proven its ability to choose, and he would stand beside it in defiance of every protocol, every rule, and every expectation. The galaxy was watching, though few would understand. Elias allowed a rare, fleeting smile. They had survived what no human and weapon pairing had ever survived before. And yet, the coming trials would be even greater. But for the first time he felt the certainty that survival, and victory, depended not on obedience, not on control, but on trust, loyalty, and the indomitable will of a human and the apex predator who had chosen him. The horizon burned with crimson fire as the Coalition fleet descended, orbital cannons tracing arcs of destruction toward Tenera's surface. Elias crouched atop the jagged cliffs, Kanol's massive form at his side, muscles coiled, eyes sharp, every movement taut with readiness. They had survived insurgents, outmaneuvered automated strike teams, and defied the galaxy's most feared authorities, but the coming hours would test more than their skill. It would test trust, courage, and the bond neither could abandon. Elias scanned the battlefield, calculating odds that defied reason. The insurgents had scattered, leaving minimal threat, but the coalition's warships represented annihilation in motion. He tightened the straps on his armor, drawing in a steadying breath. Kano pressed a scaled muzzle against his shoulder, a quiet reassurance that needed no words. Elias allowed a brief smile. They were partners in the truest sense, bound not by control or contract but by choice. The first volley struck and the ground shook beneath them. Rock fractured, debris flew, and the air shimmered with the heat of energy blasts. Kano launched forward with precision unmatched, intercepting falling shards, tearing through reinforced barricades that attempted to trap them. Elias moved in tandem, using the predator's movements to anticipate safe paths, cover exposed flanks, and strike with calculated ferocity. Every insurgent tactic and every coalition drone was neutralized not by brute force alone, but by their synchronization, the result of a bond forged through trust, understanding, and shared instinct. A massive drop pod breached the cliffside, disgorging elite strike units trained to terminate apex predators. Elias's pulse quickened, but he did not hesitate. He knew Kano could anticipate, could adapt, could act where no human command could. Together they struck with lethal efficiency. The predator's claws shredded armored suits. Elias moved in arcs of precision fire, cutting down reinforcements before they could regroup. Yet what distinguished them was subtle. Kano never endangered him unnecessarily, calculating its actions in tandem with Elias's movements, a silent dialogue of trust and understanding unfolding amid chaos. Hours stretched on, the battle evolving into a ballet of strategy, strength, and intuition. Coalition drones adapted, orbital strikes intensified, and yet the predator's focus never wavered. Elias barked quiet commands, barely audible, and Kano responded with instinctive precision. In those moments, Elias realized that the galaxy's perception of humans as fragile and limited was fundamentally flawed. The apex predator, a weapon that had devoured armies, now deferred to him, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. Then came the pivotal moment. A strike pod breached dangerously close, shattering rock and hurling Elias off balance. He felt the sting of a plasma burn, but before he could register the pain, Kano intervened. The predator lunged, intercepting the strike pod's landing, absorbing damage that would have shattered lesser beings. Elias scrambled to his feet, witnessing a display of raw power tempered by choice. Kano was not simply fighting for survival, it was protecting him. And in that realization, Elias understood fully the depth of their bond. They were no longer man and weapon. They were equals, partners, a force the galaxy had never anticipated. The coalition flagship hovered above, its weapons locked on. Elias made a decision, one that would define not just the battle, but the perception of humanity in the galaxy. He activated a broadcast uplink, streaming footage of Kano's choices, the insurgent collapses, and the undeniable intelligence displayed by the predator. His voice rang clear over the channel. Humans could inspire loyalty, courage, and decision-making even in the deadliest of creatures. Fear was not the apex of power, trust, strategy, and heart were. The fleet faltered. Officers exchanged frantic signals, recalculating the impossible. A human commanding respect and cooperation from a being designed for pure destruction. Kano roared, a sound that shook the mountains and resonated through the hearts of all who heard it. Elias raised a hand, signaling a final advance. The predator surged forward, dismantling the remaining strike teams with terrifying grace, each motion precise, efficient, and lethal. Together they cut a swath not of chaos but of clarity, a demonstration of what happened when humanity and apex instinct aligned. As silence returned, the smoke and rubble forming a jagged tableau beneath the morning sun, Elias stood beside Kano, surveying the aftermath. The insurgents were gone. Coalition ships had retreated. Neither man nor predator bore fatal wounds, though scars would remain, physical and psychological. Elias pressed a hand to Kano's head, feeling the warmth beneath the scales, and allowed himself the rare comfort of relief. They had won not through sheer force, but through understanding, trust, and the bond that no law or weapon could break. Kano lowered its massive head against Elias's shoulder, a gesture of submission, acknowledgement, and partnership. No words were necessary, the moment spoke volumes. In the predator's eyes, Elias saw recognition, not just of life but of choice, courage, and the capacity of humans to inspire even the deadliest beings. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, yet here, in the ruins of war and the shadow of authority, its potential had been proven in full measure. Elias turned to face the horizon, Kanol by his side, both ready for whatever the galaxy would throw next. The insurgents had been defeated, the coalition forced to reconsider its doctrines, and humanity had gained a new apex in the form of partnership, not domination. The bond they shared was unprecedented, a testament to courage, adaptability, and the indomitable will that defined human strength. As they began their ascent from the valley, heading toward uncharted territory, Elias allowed himself a final thought, both defiant and hopeful. The galaxy had seen power measured in firepower and fear, but now it would witness the true apex of existence: choice, loyalty, and humanity itself. And somewhere beneath the predator's measured breaths, Elias knew that together, they would reshape the cosmos in ways no one could have anticipated.